Do you want to know how to paint a portrait that's loose and expressive yet still accurate? Well, find out how I do that in this video. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. I'm Chris Fornatero, here to help simplify oil painting so you can get better faster. All right, so I get asked a lot on how I do portraits that are so loose and expressive yet still are accurate and resemble the person that I'm painting. And a lot of that has to do with how I start a painting. So that's what I'm going to show you today. All right, so the first thing I like to do is I like to get some paint on the canvas. I just throw kind of a neutral wash over a good portion of it, and the main thing here is to get some paint on the canvas so you have something to start comparing values to. And it's, as you can see, it's a pretty thin wash with just mineral spirits. I don't use any oil painting medium at this point, and I just want to get some paint on the canvas so it can start comparing values, you know, the lights to the darks. Is this lighter than that? Is this darker than this? And just start constructing the face as well. And I'm using a really large brush here. At this point, I recommend using a large brush. It forces you to see the big shapes. Don't worry about detail right now. Like, I'm not worried about detail at all right now. And in fact, another little trick that I do to help me force myself to do that is I make sure at this stage of the painting I am standing up while I paint, so I can constantly step back and see the portrait as a whole and how all the major shapes and masses of the face are working together as a whole. And you know, I'm covering up a lot of my, you know, initial drawing that I did, and that's why I keep my initial drawings fairly simple, because I know I'm just going to paint right over them and kind of redraw it again with the paint. So as I'm laying all this paint down, I'm not only getting color and value down, I'm also kind of redrawing the face in a way and using that to construct it, which is one of the reasons I'm painting the hair right now. Is not only is it a good value indicator, because I know that the lightest value in this picture is the highlights in the hair. So once I know the brightest value and I get that accurate on my painting, which is pretty easy to do with this because it's almost white, I have something I know is accurate that I can compare everything else to make decisions. Then also putting the hair allows me to reshape the forehead using the hair as kind of like the negative space to reshape, you know, and redraw it as I need. A similar thing that I'm going to do when I put in the background here in a minute is not only do I think it's really helpful to have the background color or a variation of what your background color is going to be in the back to compare your painting to as you're painting, because the background is going to be there in the finished product. So having it there while you're building the painting is really going to help a lot. And also it's just another tool to help you redraw things. Like, I can reshape the head by how I paint in this dark background here. If I need to, you know, kind of reshape the jaw or, you know, the hair. And also with painting hair, it's good to have wet paint for the edges of the hair, so you can kind of get that wispy hair, you know, on the edges look, so your hair doesn't look like a solid massive shape. It actually has kind of like a feathering to it. As you can see, I'm still just I'm using a big brush, and I'm almost painting like in straight lines. You see, I'm just thinking the shapes and the direction, value. Now I'm starting to go with a little more highlights and kind of using the highlights to redraw and reshape a lot of the face. And this is actually down underneath. A lot of times in pictures, like underneath the chin, there's what I like to call like the highlight within the shadow. Any kind of reflected light that's happening in a shadow. Like, I got this kind of like lightish blue right underneath, so I'm starting to indicate that there. This would be kind of tough to get because you see a shadow, but then you see this light, like almost like a highlight of blue, and that can get tricky to nail the value of that right. It'll come with practice and just constantly be comparing it to your reference photo. I feel like now I'm starting to get a little more detailed with my shapes. See, I'm kind of indicating the bottom of the eyelids here and getting a little more specific, and I think I even switched to a slightly smaller brush. Still on the large side, I think it's a 4 filbert, but definitely smaller than what I was using before to kind of dial in the shapes that I see. I'm still thinking, I'm still standing up and painting, I'm still thinking about the shapes, but I'm just getting a little more specific now with the shapes and the curvature of the mouth here, under the nose, kind of how all the shapes and values are working together. I just want to get this right so I have a good foundation for later on the painting when I do those details and put in the eyes and all the fun little stuff. So I'll see a lot of people kind of just start with like the eye, and they'll paint the eye, and then they'll move, they'll do that to completion, they'll paint the nose, do that to completion, move on and on. And I don't recommend doing that. I've seen people do it successfully, but if you're just starting out, it's not a great way to learn because you're not going to be seeing everything as a whole, and it's very easy to make mistakes because you're just focusing on this one aspect of the painting, and you're not really seeing how it's working with everything else. And you could be painting this nose and you kind of painted a whole different value, almost a whole different color than the mouth, because you weren't constantly looking how everything's working as a whole. Even though it might be drawn accurately and shaded accurately and look good, it's just not gonna really work out in the end. And I see I put more of the background in, and see I'm immediately, as soon as I put that background in, I'm starting to go back in with more darks, because putting that dark background in, and realize I needed to kind of push my darks a little bit more in certain areas, which is again like why I highly suggest putting a background, working your background at the same time you're working your painting, for this very reason, so you can catch these mistakes before they become even bigger mistakes. A lot of times I see paintings where you can kind of tell the background was just put in as, it seems like it was an afterthought, but they just kind of painted the painting and then put the background in later, and it's just, they're just not really working together. And I've had that happen in the past with a lot of my paintings of putting the background at the end, and it just not really working and ends up kind of ruining the painting in a way. A lot of painting with portraits for me, it's almost like a puzzle, and you'll see I'll start working in one area and I'll kind of work it as much as I can until I'm not comfortable, and I'll start working on a different area, because I'll need the information from those other areas to solve any of the problems that I'm having in the current area that I'm working on. Just throwing in some of the shirt here. Don't want to forget about that because it's a very light value, and it's kind of good to have whatever's going to be around the portrait painted to see how it's all working together. Starting to get a little more detail now. And you see with eyes, I don't really go in and paint actually, like drawing actually individual eyes. I'll get more into the eyes on the next video on this painting, but I kind of paint everything around the eyes, and that kind of paints the eyes for me. It took me kind of a while to understand that, but once I did, it just made things so much more easier to kind of paint everything around it, and from doing that, the eyes will emerge, and it makes it very easy instead of just trying to just straight up blindly draw an eye where you think it will be and the size you think it will be. It's very hard to do that, but kind of paint everything around it, the eye will come to you. Compressing my values a little bit, anywhere where it seems to be too harsh of a divide between dark and light. Gonna kind of soften that up a little bit. But coming to the end here of the beginning stage, after this, it's kind of when I sit down and get a little closer and really try to hone in the shapes and the values, but that will be for the next painting. All right, hope you found that helpful. I didn't show any of the stages of where I drew the subject. I'm probably gonna talk about that in a different painting, different video later on, but just for now, when you're drawing, it's important to be accurate on where things are. Like, you see, like all the lines that I have, like I made sure those are accurate, I made sure those are right, but you see I didn't like draw an individual eye or get really detailed with anything, because I want to leave that for the painting. But I still want to know where things are, like even though it seems loose, like it's very accurate. And this is the time where you need to be accurate where things are, but just don't get too detailed with it, if that makes sense. Don't get worried about drawing individual things. Just get the masses correct, and everything else will follow nicely. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to get notified when I make other videos down the road with this exact painting, so you can see the process all the way through, hit the notification bell so you'll get notified when I release another video. You can also follow me on Instagram at Forza43 and on Facebook at Paint Coach. I'm Chris Fornatero here, telling you to go get painting.